So then you do come back. And
Yep.
I mean, obviously, like you said, it ramped up. It ramped up all the time, and the guys were just, everybody. Like, I'm not just talking about our guys. I'm talking about everybody. It ramped up hardcore.
Yeah.
It got hotter outside. The combat got more intense. The enemy started fighting harder. They got more squared away. And like you said, you and the rest of the guys there did the mission day after day, night after night. And then one day you fly home.
Yeah.
And how was that transition for you getting back to the States?
Interesting. It was an interesting transition. So from the time that I left Ramadi, we packed up our stuff, we left Ramadi. I think we went to Kuwait for a day or two. Went to Lejeune, went to Japan, because I had to check out of both places. Jack, I think it was 6 days on the calendar from the day I left Ramadi to the day I landed on a plane in San Diego, which at the time was all I wanted. And I've been fairly good about this throughout my career, is when I want things to happen administratively, I can make those things happen. If I catch wind that there's a flight from Japan to San Diego and I can get on that flight, I'm going to get on that flight. Even if my CO is yelling at me like, how did you get out of here so fast? I'm like, I have this thing in the guy in the paper and I got to go. And I'm out. I wanted to get out quickly. So I found myself in San Diego executing my next orders, which the Marine Corps said, you go to Ramadi, you do the factory, you're going to go back to San Diego from there, which will be your next set of orders. So I knew while I was in Iraq that San Diego was in my future. My wife had already moved down there. I told you she was living with my best friend Neil, who was on that FAC tour before me. So I go in Ramadi. His battalion comes home. We show up. My wife and my best friend are living together in San Diego, which was really good for her because he was able to kind of keep her aware of what's going on, but knew exactly how to explain it in a way that wasn't going to freak her out. Mm-hmm. And he also, to be honest with you, knew how to downplay. Like, I would call, hey, we're doing this, no big deal. I mean, I wasn't telling him half of what the hell was going on. You're not going to share those stories. So he was a really great resource for her. I paid very little time worrying about it, to be honest with you. I was comfortable that she had a good support structure, which she really didn't. We got married. I deployed 4 months later to Ramadi. She started dating a dude who was driving a Corvette and living in Tahoe as a Top Gun instructor. And then 4 months after we got married, I was in Ramadi. So there was no easing. And so I knew there was just, I didn't know at the time, I didn't think of it, but it was obvious that looking back that she was just thrown into an environment that she was totally unprepared for. Now, forget about just me being gone, but just the fact that I was in Ramadi, and it's all over the news. Everybody knew what was going on. I think one of my Marines is killed, and a lot of crazy stuff going on. And next thing you know, I'm home. September 28th, I'm back in San Diego. 365 days to the day, I'm home. And I checked into an F-18 squadron the day after I got home. Before October 1st, I was back into an F-18 squadron in San Diego, which is insane. And to be really blunt, I was, all those guys in Anglico went back to Anglico and Camp Lejeune and Camp Hansen in Japan. I was like, later, bros. No long goodbyes. High five, great deployment. I'm out. I was just on to other things, and I kind of extricated myself. It's I followed the rules. I do whatever I'm supposed to do, and before I know it, I'm back there. And I think also kind of kidding myself. That was to be the best thing for me. Let's get home. I knew something was amiss because on the drive home from the airport, I fly into San Diego International, just down the road. My wife and my mom, who lives in San Diego, both of them came to pick me up from the airport. You've already met my mom, great lady. My wife and my mom picked me up from the airport. I got pictures of them meeting me there. Get in the car, drive from San Diego International to our house in Pacific Beach. And as we're pulling onto Chalcedony up to the house, I screamed at them and told them to stop talking or something like that. I said something like, I don't know what it was, but I think I just remember sitting in the passenger seat and the gears would just start. I'm in a truck or a car, whatever. I don't know what it was, but something's going on, and I think just the pressure is building, and I have no sense of what's going on, no outlet for it. And they're having a perfectly normal adult conversation that might have been an octave above what I was willing to accept or tolerate, maybe. And I completely freaked out on my wife and my mom, who I hadn't seen in a year. And, they were like, oh, sorry, they were super cool, no pushback. And it was an indicator like, yeah.
And
okay.
you recognize that?
Immediately.
You're like, oh, God.
Yep, immediately. And it was that combination recognition of, that's not good. And clearly I have things I need to deal with that I wasn't quite aware of. So I knew, no question, right away. And I think, I think about this a lot with other Marines and the things you experience in combat. You've talked about PTSD a lot. Look, that's a subject you'd spend hours on. The bottom line is everybody deals with things differently. It doesn't mean you're broken or messed up. It just means you have some process you got to go through and you got to deal with it. And we all deal with it differently. I had maybe talked myself into, I was 33, I was a fairly experienced guy. I was surrounded by very young Marines who maybe in my mind didn't have maybe the emotional maturity, maybe the life skills to maybe manage some of these same chaotic things. Guys that saw Chris get shot. I maybe kind of built myself up a little bit. I was a little better equipped, and I was better equipped in my mind. And I in a matter of 45 minutes from the airport to the house, I'm flying off the handle on something. So it just, all it was, man, it was those two things. Like, that's not good. And this is going to probably happen again. I'm going to need to think about this. I can't pretend like I'm not going to just have some sort of residual. You can't leave Ramadi, be in San Diego 6 days later, and not bring some baggage home with you. And I was bringing some baggage home. And there was some baggage there, a little bit. So that transition was it started.
Is there anything anything that helped you?
Yeah, dude, I'll tell you what helped the most is my best friend who had been in Ramadi and endured all of that loss. Look, right. Our story, the story, the guys that we replaced, the guys that replaced us, it's a very similar story. They understand that. I think having an outlet, having one other dude, it happened to be my best friend since we were 14. So it was, you want to talk about just hitting the jackpot and being the best equipped to sort of just deal and power through it and accept what's going on and embrace it and all those things that go along with it. I had an outlet, man. I had my best friend who, he knew every place we were. Yeah. It wasn't even like, oh, he was here and it was the same place.
Yeah, because Ramadi's not that big.
It's just not that big, man. And so we say, I was on the corner of Sunset in Michigan. He's like, yeah, I've been there about 500 times. Yeah. And he was struggling a little bit too. Again, it's all relative. We're handled it relatively okay. I'm going back to kind of dealing a normal life. But the moments when you get those little spikes, and those is what kind of comes up and gets you, those little spikes, those are unforeseen kind of reactions. He could see that in me, and I could see that in him, and we actually we're really good for each other. When I see him kind of get a little shaky, a little break, like I'm not, he's not digging his environment a little bit, or he'd see that in me. You had that other person to kind of bring you back to helping you deal with that, which is good. The flip side of that, while it was really helpful for him to be there, I think it was really tough on Whitney because she was not my outlet for that.
Right.
I wasn't,
she kind of got cut out.
Totally. And I didn't, certainly not by design. I'm not like doing this calculation of I'm not going to use her as a resource, for that. And to be honest with you too, there's also a little part of me. She doesn't
know what the corner of Michigan Sunset is like, so.
Totally, man. And I'll be really candid, I think I would have been almost embarrassed is maybe not the right word, but I wasn't, I don't know if I wanted her to see that part of
right.
it. You know what I mean? Like, hey, babe, check out this ridiculous vulnerability that I have right now that I'm going to carry with me for God knows how long. That's going to come up out of nowhere, and you're going to have to just deal with it. So there was I think the thing that bothered me the most and was part of just kind of getting back to day-to-day life was I would get, when things didn't go well, when I had my moments, my reaction was I just get pissed off. It was that feeling of, so I'd have this like, some event would happen, something stupid would catch my attention and kind of heighten my, my response. And because it happened, I'd be annoyed with myself that I let it bother me. And then I'd be pissed off at myself because I let it bother me. You know what I mean? Like this ridiculous cycle of, I told you the story the other day. My wife and I guarantee she remembers the story. We're walking across the street downtown. By the beach, I think. And an auto body shop is running the air drill to pull some tires off, that kind of sound. And as we're walking, I think my left arm is over her shoulder. We're walking like this. I hear that sound, and my first reaction is I push her down to the ground. And in the time that it takes to do that and catch that it's happening is maybe a third of a second. You know what I mean? So I hear it. I'm reacting and pushing her to the ground. I'm kind of getting on top of her that's the car. It's not a thing. There's no reason for you to do this, is about a third of a second. And what bothered me the most about it is that I did it. Not that I felt like that, is that I reacted to it, and I was like embarrassed, like, what's wrong with me to go through that? And she's like, what the, and it sounded like, and kind of going through that whole thing. And I think just the fact that I had responses pissed me off, and I would just kind of, honestly, I have a temper about it. And that was, she got to see me just get pissed off at stuff for no real good reason.
Which you never really get pissed off. Like, I mean,
I have tempers about just stuff that I would get mad about stuff that just didn't make sense.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a temper about things that my computer pisses me off just like it pisses you off, man. That's totally normal, right? I would have reactions to stuff that just, there was no way for her to say, oh, that makes sense, I understand. It would just be this totally oddball. Somebody would say something wrong. It would just trigger in ways that she would look at me and kind of be like, who are you? She knew all my flaws. She knew was everything right and wrong with me. And all of a sudden now I'm doing all this other stuff.
You put another little thing in the mix.
Yeah, I add that to the mix. So I got my wife who, we get married, I leave, I go on this deployment, I come back, I'm home for maybe 7 months before I deploy again. In that 7 months, welcome to marriage to Dave Berke. That involves a year-long deployment, 7 months in Iraq. God only knows what the hell I was, I'm back to work, so I'm back at a squadron as the XO, working ridiculous XO hours in a fighter squadron, prepping it to go on a deployment. I voluntarily extend my time to make the deployment, which is exactly what you should do at the beginning of your marriage, is volunteer to extend on a deployment. I got accepted into grad school. I was going to go to Dartmouth. I was getting out of the Marine Corps. I was going to go to get my MBA. And I remember the conversation of, hey, I'm going to extend. It asked me to extend, and, I was explaining why I was going to do what I was going to do. And she's like, why would you do that? And I said, so I can deploy. And you hear those words like, God, did I just say that to my wife? Like, which is so I can not be with you, so I can be apart from you, so I can hang out with the boys and go do that. You know what I mean?
I can not retire from the Marine or get out of the Marine Corps.
So I cannot do all these other things that I
not set up this future that I told you all about and sold you on.
Totally. So to say that my wife, and everybody's got those stories, the laundry list of reasons why she should have just sort of cut bait and be like, no, this is not happening, is a lot longer than the list of reasons why she shouldn't have. And
props.
We're good. She's here. And my marriage with her, for all the ups and downs that goes along with everybody's marriage, the one thing I don't worry about, even when we're at our worst, at our absolute worst, which our worst is whatever it is, we have our worst moments. At our absolute worst, I don't have a shred, I don't have a brain cell of thought of, I wonder if our marriage is going to survive this, this throwdown we're having over God knows what, So we kind of went through the fire there, and she
got forged.
Yeah, big time. She's a stud. She deserves mad props for going through that, because I'm not really sure why she did, to be honest with you.
You know what? I can't come up with any good reasons either.
She had a lot of options on the table. I'm not sure. So that transition was tough, man.
So now you're in another squadron. You go on deployment again, which is another. What are you doing on that deployment? Just more.
So I'm back in an F-18 squadron. I'm the XO and the OPSO. I actually did both jobs on this deployment. We just go to Japan. It's a Westpac.
Okay.
So Western Pacific, we're back in Iwakuni and Okinawa, just doing
exercise
and training, that kind of stuff.
Get done with that. And so now maybe it's time to get out of the Marine Corps.
Before I left on that deployment, I had told my commander, the group commander and the squadron commander, hey, this is it for me. I'm hanging it up. It's been awesome. I happily to extend for this deployment that they needed me to go on. It was a great experience. I got to train a bunch of young guys. Life was good. But they knew before I left that I was going to be out of the Marine Corps at the end of that. I deferred at Dartmouth for a year, paid my non-refundable deposit, which I've never gotten back. It wasn't.
That's why they call it non-refundable.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. My point is, I wasn't kicking around the idea of getting out. I was in full execution. Yeah. We had looked at houses. Like, we were in execution. This was merely a detour to get to that end state. And when I'm due back from that deployment in January, I think it is, of the following year. And It turns out that the Marine Corps wants to send a guy to go fly F-22s with the Air Force for 3 years. And they're accepting applications for the F-22 Raptor exchange, which had never happened before, never happened since. It was a one-time thing. And the guy that they picked, was going to go to non-deploying in Nellis and fly the F-22 Raptor. I should probably apply, I guess. Just seems like a reasonable thing to do. Because if they say no, then I'll just go get my MBA. It's all good. And lo and behold, at the end of December, I get the word that I got picked up for this Raptor exchange. And I remember calling Whitney. I'm like, "Hey, babe," and it's like, "Oh, here we go." Totally, right there. Totally. She knows what's up. And I did the standard Dave Burke oversell. Hey, no deploying. We're gonna go to here's all the goodness. There's no downside, And she's like, "Shut up," and she was good with it.
Yeah.
It was just another one of those things. Like, I can't say no to this. This is just something that doesn't happen. You just don't get to. Nobody gets to fly the F-22 in the Marine Corps because the Marine Corps doesn't fly F-22s. Same thing I said when I flew F-16s and Top Gun and all this sort of stuff. So it was just another thing that I just couldn't believe was happening. And I couldn't leave the Marine Corps saying I walked away from that. I just couldn't. And she was totally on board and came home and didn't get back my non-refundable deposit and moved to Vegas and started flying the F-22 Raptor.
3 years up there, and then at some point that rolled
Almost
into
4.
the... Oh.
Yeah.
And that rolls into the F-35 at some point?
So I'm flying F-22s.
How many people were flying the F-22 at this point?
So we probably had... I knew at the time what number I was. I think I might have been in the 100-something.
Mm-hmm.
We had 2 squadrons that were stood up. And it was starting to pick up the pace. It was early 2008, so the Raptor was just starting to get its legs underneath it. It was started building more, and it was starting to become a thing. And the Marine Corps had this idea that they're going to build this new stealth airplane called the F-35, and they're going to get it. And they wanted someone to go to the Air Force to learn all the airplanes are really similar. They said, go steal all their experience and all the pain that they've gone through to stand up this thing, and then you're going to bring it back to the Marine Corps. So the deal was this F-22 gig was really high probability I was going to go right from the F-22 to the F-35 and command the first operational squadron. And lo and behold, man, that's exactly what happened. We went to Tyndall. We lived in Tyndall for 3 months when I went through training, and that was awesome. We're living on the beach in Florida for 3 months. I get trained in the Raptor. We move out to Vegas. Lived there for 3+ years. Started a family. My first 2 kids were born in Las Vegas. We're killing it, man. I mean, it was awesome. And as I'm getting ready to leave Vegas, I get selected to command the first operational. There was a guy there before. They didn't have airplanes. They had a guy. There was another CO before me, but I was going to go out there and accept and start flying the first F-35s in the Marine Corps. I show up, and this poor guy was selected to do the same thing.
Yeah.
2 years prior, a great dude, but we'd stayed in touch, and we were always in contact and helping him stand up with everything. And I get there, Jocko. I'm there, I think, 2 days, and the first airplane showed up. And I'm like, what's the big deal? He spent 2 years, didn't see a single airplane.
The working, setting up all this paperwork, grinding, doing all this administrative stuff to prep. He gets no airplanes. You show up 2 days later, boom.
Dude, the amount of work that him and his guys went through to stand up the squadron. And I literally showed up to work, and the next day the first airplane landed. Yeah,
that's my new nickname for you.
Like, this really isn't that hard, man. What's the big deal? And he and I did a turnover, and he left, and I started flying F-35s. And that's a whole part of my career. We could spend hours on that, but I flew the Raptor, which was an amazing airplane, and I flew the F-35, which was this amazing airplane, and I got to totally be relevant in aviation. I had sort of exhausted. I did all the things I wanted to do in a Hornet. I love that airplane. I did Top Gun. I kind of had reached all the things. And we talked about this too. When you leave Top Gun, you're never going to be that good ever again. So it's just a matter of how slow you can make the process of getting worse. It's just how can you slow it down to be as good as you can, knowing that you will never be as good as you were there, because you're never going to get the reps again, ever. You're just never going to get it. And so it's just a matter of kind of slowing down that process. And at some point in your mind, like, I don't want to be in this business if I'm not at the top of my game. When I flew the F-22, I didn't have a job. I didn't I wasn't the opso of a squadron, which is what I should have been.
You just showed up and flew the plane.
I just showed up and flew the plane. I had some leadership responsibility in the organization.
You just showed up, grab the keys from someone, take it out on a spin, run it into the ground,
write a little report, and be like,
bring it
let's
back,
do it again.
hand the keys back to the maintenance guys, and
hey, this thing's broken. Give me another one. It was
good deal, Dave.
It was awesome. Yeah, so I did that. Totally great for my marriage. I was able to combine all these professional interests with great, which you don't get to do in the Marine Corps when there's a war going on. Mm-hmm. You just don't get to do that. And here I am. And dude, I had no more friends in the Marine Corps, man. Nobody liked me. They're all doing back-to-back deployments, and airplanes are breaking, and I'm living in Vegas, flying the Raptor. All my bros were like, "We're done with you, man. We got nothing for you." So, I almost felt guilty. I did not feel guilty, but I almost did. Almost did. And then I go out to we moved to Destin, Florida, or Fort Walton Beach, and we lived in Niceville in this awesome house in this great community, and I was the first pilot to ever fly the F-35B operationally in the world. Like, ridiculous. I did that for like 2.5 years, and it was awesome.
And then what brought you up to DC?
So what brought me up to DC? So I was so sure that I was going to leave the Marine Corps after that command tour of the F-35 that I reapplied to Dartmouth, got back in again, got accepted.
Do you have to give him another deposit?
No, I was smart enough not to pay the deposit because there's a tiny little possibility that wasn't going to work out. Anyway, I did get into Dartmouth again, and I was like, babe, I'm going to go to get my MBA. I've always wanted to get my MBA, and I got selected for an academic fellowship where I basically got to go to grad school for a year. They sent me to Johns Hopkins University to get my master's, and I basically went to DC and I was a civilian for a year. And between those two things was another terrible deal. It's like, can the Marine Corps like to pay you to go be a full-time student at Johns Hopkins, which they did. So we moved up to DC, and I went to Johns Hopkins and got my master's.
And then the next thing they offered you was to go back and...
Yeah, so from there, the payback of that good deal was to go to the Pentagon, which was totally a reasonable thing. I'd post-command, I'd been to school. I certainly couldn't complain about how tough my life was in the Marine Corps since, the last 8 years or whatever it was. And I just basically did a desk job in the Pentagon, and worked in the Joint Staff and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, just working some project. It wasn't all that exciting. I learned a bunch, but it was just kind of a med job. I was, very 9 to 5, strict hours, don't take work home, no BlackBerry, no real responsibility, pretty chill life. Life was pretty good. I picked up Colonel while I was there. The end of 2015, I was selected for Colonel. And in the summer of 2016, I selected for command again as a Colonel this time to command an F-35 squadron. But I didn't want to do that. I don't know how this is going to come across to the people listening and what a terrible deal it was. The Marine Corps asked me to be a colonel and go fly F-35s again. And I don't want this to come across that I was complaining, but the one thing that in all those great deals, and dude, they were great deals. The thing that I was missing the most was that I always kind of felt like I had one foot in and one foot out. They were these non-deploying jobs, the Air Force Exchange. The F-35 job was kind of standing up a squadron. We weren't prepping for anything, and I loved it, but I could feel sort of underneath the surface like a lack of investment. I could tell I just wasn't, I didn't have to be 100% pot committed because there was no, we're going to go to deploy, or we're going to go to, there was no thing that was going to happen. And I think one of the healthiest things about being in the Marine Corps is you're always prepping for something.
Yeah.
So even in the crappy stuff you don't want to do, hey, we got to do this because the end state is this. And I was missing that. And it sort of over time started to erode a little bit that I was catching myself, I don't know, I'm a little slack in the line, to be honest with you. To be really blunt, I didn't have to bring my A game every day. I just didn't. I could do the things that I was doing, certainly in an airplane, because there was just an element that there was no outcome to what I was preparing for. And I started to kind of find other interests. Like school became really interesting to me. I did that year, and so I continued my education at Johns Hopkins and started working towards my MBA because I needed something or wanted something else. And once you kind of catch in your mind that the Marine Corps and what they're asking you to do, I was going to go back to a training squadron. I wanted to go to be an operational commander with operational units that are preparing to go something. I wasn't going to get to do that. I was going to go back to a training environment. I caught myself losing the thing that was the most passionate about the Marine Corps and seeing it as more of like, okay, 3 years here, this will get me to this retirement and this amount of money. And it was just starting to become a little too professional and not enough about a passion. And I don't mean to say I was needed to feel like a 21-year-old again. You don't need to recreate it like that. But my wife actually sat me down, we were talking, and she just kind of looked at me and was like, dude, you're not going to be happy doing this. It was really clear to her, I think even more clear than it was for me. It's hard to come across as ungrateful, but I was not going to be good at that job because there was something that was missing. It was something that I didn't. There was nothing about it that it made me feel passionate about doing it. So no joke, man. Last year, August, I basically told her I declined command, I declined promotion, and I put in for retirement all the same day. And that was a big move, man. It was a big move.
That created a little splash out there in the world of the Marine Corps.
Maybe. It surprised everybody but my wife, obviously. She was totally got it, and I knew it was the right thing. And my closest buddies, I mean, I talked to my bros, my bros, those guys understood. But, yeah, it was a big move. And I was turning down what, by all rights, was a really great deal, another great deal.
No doubt about it.
But